welcome to My Cancer, My Choices podcast. I'm Mandy Barter. I'm a co-founder of My Cancer, My Choices. And this afternoon I'm with Matt Williams, who is the director of the Samaritans in Oxford. And Matt and I got chatting one day about men's health, and he said, actually, I know lots about this and about why men don't access health services and men in general in health. So I said, could you come along and talk to us on our podcast? And so thank you for being here.
Here I am.
Here you are. So tell me, Matt, why, well, let's start from the beginning. You have been a Samaritan for how long?
So I've been a Samaritan volunteer for 10 years.
Yeah.
One of the best things I've ever done with my time. I got very interested in Samaritans, got very inspired by the people who trained me, by my fellow volunteers, and I got really stuck in. I became the branch publicity officer, became director for outreach, and 10 years later I have the privilege of being the director for Oxford Samaritans.
Oh, congratulations, because that's a fairly new appointment, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
And you get paid absolutely nothing.
Nothing for the privilege, yes.
I know that, being belonging to a charity, but what do you get out of it?
Where do you begin, kind of thing. I'm working with amazing volunteers, a fantastic group of people. Being a Samaritan itself, people often ask me, is it a depressing thing? No, it's not depressing. What I hear on the phone, is incredibly depressing and hard to hear. But the act of listening, of being alongside somebody in their darkest moments, really listening, it's an incredibly intimate thing, it's a very human thing, and it's always life affirming. I invariably puts all the problems I have in my life into perspective, and it's a great thing. I'd recommend it to anybody if you're interested in other people. I want to make a difference. I think you really can as a Samaritan.
Yeah. And I think, because you were talking earlier and you said that you want your volunteers, not only, you said empathy and compassion are a given, but you want them to be courageous.
I do.
And I think that's such a great word. Just tell me about that.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I think, people's perceptions of what Samaritans do might be that we're warm, caring people, nice people, perhaps. Like I say, I should hope that's kind of a given. That's a base level. And what I really want is courage, and that's the courage to ask difficult questions, the courage to hear and acknowledge difficult answers, and not to run away, to really pursue that, to ask and stay with that person, and really hone in on, focus on the difficult stuff, because all the light at the end of the tunnel type stuff, or it'll get better, or have you thought about, you can get that as 10 a penny in the real world. Actually, when people call Samaritans, I think it's not a conversation as such, but it's an interaction between two people, and we do something which I suppose you'd call steering into distress, and that's not something you can do lightly. I think you have to give of yourself, and actually I would hope that at the end of every duty that somebody should actually feel quite tired having listened and really been present and really been alongside people, and that takes courage. So yeah, absolutely, courage is what we want.
How long have you obviously get a lot of training as a Samaritan? So how long is the training? Okay,
so the training is just about to change, but actually training as a Samaritan takes some time. It has to. You have to be really prepared to deal with very, very difficult situations and how to respond to them. So what happens is you'd apply, you get invited to what's called an information evening. You find out about Samaritans, because actually it's not for everyone. It really isn't. If you still want to apply, you do, and we'd invite you to a selection morning, I think it is now, and you'd meet other people who want to volunteer, and you're really doing sort of little exercises, finding out whether it's for you, if we like you, if you still want to be in. You get interviewed by 2 volunteers, and then the training can begin. We tend to run 3 trainings a year. That may extend to 4, we'll see, but takes about, it's sort of 6, the new training is going to be 6 training sessions, which is almost half as long as it used to be, but they're very intensive, and in between those 6 sessions you would have online training modules as well. Okay. So you're really trying to kind of condense it into that. The training doesn't finish there. You're then paired with a mentor. Your mentor then sits alongside you. You'd probably hear them take calls to begin with. on the first shift, and then they'd listen to you taking calls. It's the only time that another person listens into a phone call is when the mentoring's happening.
Right.
And that'll happen over maybe 5-6 initial duties. Then you start taking calls by yourself. And after 6 months of that, you are looking at becoming a fully fledged member of the branch, a fully trained Samaritan. You lose your probation status.
Yeah.
So really, I'd say the process takes about a year,
Yeah.
Realistically, and it has to.
Oh, absolutely.
And you hope that every single, I've done a lot of training in my life. The Samaritans training that I've received was incredible. I was really inspired by it. I had a great mentor, and actually now I really love mentoring because you see somebody who naturally is very nervous taking their first calls, really trying to find their feet, really trying to put that training into action, not wanting to mess up, and really we're encouraging them to be really warm and really being alongside the person on the end of the phone. And you see people flourish. Some people I've mentored and they've been brilliant from the word go. Other people need time and reflection and input. But it's lovely to see people do it, and I want anybody who volunteers to be a Samaritan to get the sort of the enjoyment, and I do enjoy it. I find it rewarding, I find it satisfying, but there is an enjoyment to it.
Well, you wouldn't have done it.
I wouldn't. I'm not a masochist. Do you know what I mean? It's like 10 years of doing this.
Yeah.
I've got a lot going on in my life. I've got 101 other things I could be doing. Yeah. If I didn't enjoy it, it'd be a poor do. So I genuinely want people to enjoy it as much as I do.
Well, you do a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Yeah, really do. And the reason we got chatting is because I obviously through the charity, we support people with all types of cancers, men and women, right from the very start of their diagnosis. Yeah. But what I found, and we've been running the charity since 2015, is that less men were accessing the service, and that's how we got chatting.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I was saying why, and what about in the Samaritans in terms of your callers? Yeah. Do you get more women than?
Well, this is the interesting thing, of course. So. Oxford branch, in terms of our volunteers, we're 2/3 female, 1/3 male. That's not a bad balance. Some branches do better, some do far worse. My real issue is that 75% of suicide in the UK, this year, is male. In 2014, it was 78% of suicide was male. That's about 12 men a day in the UK, which is far too many. And 75% of the people who call Samaritans are not men. Might be 50-50. I don't know. My real concern is that Samaritans offer a service which on paper should really speak to men. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. Tick all the boxes in terms of male help seeking. So we're confidential. Yeah. We don't tell anybody. We're anonymous. No names. You don't have to give your name. We don't have to give our name. It's not, that's not a big deal. And it's open 24 hours a day. So if a man wants to pick up the phone and call, it's a free phone number as well. He will speak to somebody who will listen to him, not needing to know his name. Even if they do know the name, they're not going to tell anybody about what they're talking about. Whatever you say to Samaritans stays within Samaritans, as it were. It doesn't go. So that is a service which really on paper should tick all the boxes for men. And yet I often speak to men. Latterly I speak to men and say, have you ever thought about calling Samaritans? And invariably, I work in the NHS in my day job, the same is true of that. Have you thought about talking to somebody in the NHS? Have you thought about phoning Samaritans? Yeah. And a lot of guys say no. And I say, that's interesting, why not? I just don't think it's for me. What about older people? What about kids? What about, all the other people who need the service? There's this perception that Samaritans... There's also a perception, of course, that Samaritans is for people who are just about to end their life. Yeah. I would say 25% of our callers have suicidal thoughts. Their calls are around suicide and suicidal thoughts and feelings. But 75% of our callers are not. They're people who are just going through a difficult time, want to talk to somebody, just want to let out whatever they're feeling. But I think that message isn't necessarily understood by men, and that men feel, well, things are bad in my life, but they are not that bad. So it's a really interesting thing, and just to sort of bring you up to where, you know, what turned me on to the whole issue of men and male help seeking.
Yeah.
I was at a male psychology conference in London, and I heard Jane Powell talk, and Jane, incredible person, she was involved in the Green and Common movement. She's really about equality, you know. She believes she's against any inequality wherever it happens.
Yeah.
And if 78% of suicide is male, that is, that's inequality in action.
Yeah.
It means that suicide is a gendered issue.
Yeah.
And she formed the Campaign Against Living Miserably.
Calm.
Okay? Calm.
Amazing.
Exactly.
Was it her? Gosh.
It was.
Right.
So she began the Calm Zone in Merseyside when, in the kind of guess late 90s, early 2000s, when male suicide on Merseyside was really going up in the northwest. And she put up one slide, and it just had a piece of toilet paper, and scrawled on it was "feeling shit?" ? Call calm.
Brilliant.
And I was elated, literally elated, because at last somebody is saying something that resonates, that speaks to me. I sometimes worry, I love Samaritans, don't get me wrong, cut me through the middle and it'll Samaritans running through me. But because we listen to anybody and everyone, it means our target audience is really kind of no one. And you think about specifics. So it can be a bit sort of anodyne. Feeling shit, we all know what that means. And that's where men respond to. It's a touch of humour, it's a reverence, but it's in your face. There's no messing about. It's not are you feeling sad? Are you feeling down? Are you a bit blue? So that really turned me on to it. I had recently become a father, and I had a little boy. And there's nothing like really kind of thinking about what sort of man do I want my son to grow up to be? What sort of man am I? What sort of father was my dad to me? This is really tricky. I have to really think about this. And I think there's a lot of talk about toxic masculinity and all of these things. There are many, many great things about manhood and being a man. And it really made me think about that. So that kind of really got and when I found out that 78% of suicide was male, and then I thought about the service that Samaritans provide, and I think, well, why aren't 78% of our callers male? Really got me thinking. So that's how I got involved, and I helped to establish the Calm Zone in Oxfordshire, Buckinghamshire, Berkshire, Milton Keynes as well.
Wonderful.
So a really important thing.
And 78%, is it men under 40?
No, it's an interesting issue,
right,
because statistics can be are really difficult to sort of pin down. Yeah. So currently in the UK, 75% of all suicide is male.
Yeah.
The person most likely to end their life by suicide are men aged between 35 and 55. So it's men in midlife.
Right.
The peak age of suicide in men is about 44 years. Yeah. So really bang in the middle of your 40s. And there's all sorts of reasons why that's the case. And overwhelmingly, when you look at all the statistics, these are men in midlife, possibly, in employment, but there's usually marital breakdown, relationship breakdown. Yeah. There's several factors. Often these men are living by themselves. There's all sorts of reasons for it. But suicide is the leading cause of men under the age of 50. Right. Okay? That's not to say that men over 50 don't end their lives by suicide in high numbers. It's just that other things, cardiovascular disease, cancer, will tend to pick off men more than suicide. Right. So there's a real worry that people sort of think, well, certainly in the 80s, there was a lot of youth or early 20s suicide. And sadly, as that cohort's grown up, they've continued to end their life in larger numbers. What's really worrying to me today is that we're now starting to see young suicide on the rise again after a 20-year drop. Right. And if there is this scarring effect where men who killed themselves in their late teens and 20s in the 80s are now killing themselves in later life, will we see the same thing again? So it's a very, and suicide is an incredibly complex area. Yeah. There is no simple solution to it. Yeah. There are many, every single one is different. Yeah. But if you're talking about what leads men, not talking, not seeking help too late, is actually lethal in men. And tragically, you hear so often, a guy will eventually go to the doctor, and of course the doctor will say, okay, well, we'll refer you to cognitive behavioural therapy, to a therapist, but you have to wait 6 weeks for your appointment. Right. That guy may not have 6 days. Do you know what I mean? So it really matters, and it's not just about making services accessible to men, it's about allowing men to really be able to express themselves. And that's what I want. Yeah.
But by the time they've actually got to that position where they are going to the doctor, that is...
Yeah, that's crisis point.
That's crisis point for them.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, because that's exactly what Mark was saying earlier, that they takes a much longer time to actually get to that place. Yeah. Yeah.
And again, it's for a multitude of reasons. It's the same with Samaritans. So there I am saying to guys who've ever thought about calling Samaritans, and they say no, and we get talking about it, and then they sort of think, oh, actually, maybe I could call. And it only takes, I would say, men to have one bad experience. Maybe somebody misunderstands, or maybe they don't feel they get the support they want. The phone could go down. Guess what? They ain't calling Samaritans again. Same with the doctor. The doctor doesn't understand. And often, it's that door handle conversation that men have. Just as they're leaving, oh, doctor, just one more thing. And so we need to find ways to make it okay for men to talk, because I don't believe, male help seeking, male suicide is a bit of a hobby horse for me, because I think it's really important that people know about it. But it's really important, and people often say to me, well, men don't talk. Well, actually, men are capable of talking. Men are able to articulate quite complex emotions, very complex emotions, as well as anybody else. The issue is, for men, is that often it's not safe for them to really be open. What I mean by that is, it could be relationship ending. If I, as a man, turn to you as my partner and say, I'm really struggling, I don't think I can carry on, you are going to view me differently. Certainly my perception is that you will. If I tell my employer, it could be career ending, it could be career limiting. You think about the police, the armed services, the law, medicine, it can actually be quite jeopardising to admit. So better to say nothing at all. Talking to your mates, will I be judged? And this is what it all boils down to, really, is, am I, as a man, if I really tell you what's going on, how will you view me? Will you judge me? Will you call my masculinity, my manhood into question? And anything that might cause a diminishment in your perception of me as a man, actually, I may well not open up. And we need to challenge that. We need to it's not about safe spaces, but we need to allow men, I talk to men and I have really fantastic conversations with men, but only when it's 2 of us in a room, or if there are more people, then it's a safe space and nobody's going to judge anybody else. And that's the wonderful thing that you can have this, this sort of 10 minutes, I want to put a time limit on it, it's usually about 10 minutes, where you're it's almost like a dance. You're maybe circling each other, a bit like, stags perhaps. Yes, the challenge of it. It's also a dance though. And basically what's happening is, can I trust you? Can you trust me? And this is a man and a woman as well. It's not just 2 men. No. And really the groundwork's being paved. And that moment when you say something like, with Samaritans, you say, well, Samaritans are here to listen to people who are going through a difficult time, perhaps feeling suicidal, things so bad that they think about ending their lives. I wonder whether that's how you sometimes feel. Quite often the answer comes yes. And that's when we as Samaritans really get to work. But that doesn't just happen. There has to be trust, needs to be established. Can I trust you with what I need to tell you? Are you going to listen? Are you going to allow me to say my feelings, my way, without judgment? And that's hard to do. Do you know what I mean? It's not. Yeah. But what the society I'd love to live in is where anybody male, female, doesn't matter, whatever your gender, whatever your sexuality, however old you are, all of those things, you can say your truth, your way, and it will be heard. And we still live in a world we hear, man up, grow a pair, shut up, suck it up. And I understand, there is bravado and all of those things, but if you're really struggling, those words are not helpful. And I'm not saying we should all be going around sort of emoting all the time, but we should at least be able to turn to the people we care about, our mates, and allow them, and listen, and actively listen, and say, actually, it's okay. And that's the great thing when I talk to people who have had that experience. A young lad once said to me, it's a fantastic thing, he said, when I was going through a difficult time and I was going to tell my mates, it was a bit like asking a girl out. If it went wrong, he would be completely pied, it would be awful, and he'd be humiliated and devastated. But actually, when he did turn to his mates and say, I'm going through this, they were completely cool with it. And but it's the sense of trepidation about opening up that stops men from seeking help, or certainly stops them from seeking help when they really need it, which is much, much sooner when we can actually do something about it.
What works, Matt, for men?
Okay, so a number of things need to happen. I mean, like I was saying about Samaritans being a confidential service, anonymity, certainly non-judgmental. I think being non-judgmental for anybody, but particularly for men, is crucial to any sort of care, support, mechanism. If you want to engage with men, I think you need to use very clear language. Don't beat about the bush. I think you need that real in-your-face language. Let's not dress it up in fancy words. Yeah. And a sense of humour. Yeah. Okay? Sense of humour is really important. I think allowing people to retain their dignity. I think also you need to go to where men are. Okay? You can have the fanciest new clinic, you can have the fanciest new building, you can make it just so. Guys aren't going to be going there. You need to take all of that and take it to the pub, the club, the football club, the rugby club, where men already are, where men feel comfortable. And I'm not saying these should be men-only spaces, but there's certainly places where guys feel comfortable. Those are things which I think can help. Although as a Samaritan we think about, feelings, and often people say, well, how do you feel about that? How do you feel can be a really powerful question, but it can be really mindless. Oh, how do you feel? I'm quite in touch with my emotions, okay? But if you ask me how I feel now, there's a number of things, So, I'm comfortable, but I'm thinking about this, I'm a bit hungry, it's not helpful. You're not getting to know me through that. Actually, when you listen to somebody, when you genuinely listen to somebody, you can hear the emotion behind the words. If someone's telling you a sad story, you don't have to ask how they feel, because they sound sad. You sound sad. You sound angry about that. You sound really hurt by that. And so I try not to label feelings with men. It's about listening. It's not saying how do you feel. Tell me more about that. Allow guys to tell a story. Really allow that to happen, because in those instances, men are finding their own way forward in their own words, which I think is really important. Again, it's true for everybody, but particularly important for men. I would also say that the language we use around emotions with men, sometimes people talk about things like distress, or, oh, that's really upsetting, that's really distressing. I don't think these are words that guys really respond to. I would use more dynamic words, more action-based words. That sounds tough, that sounds like a struggle, sounds like you're struggling with that, you're really battling with this right now. And that's not to say the words have to be gendered, but I think men respond to that sense of an active component rather than and distress. I think there are words which rightly or wrongly are either more masculine or feminine. And I think it's about using those. I would also use guys' words back to them. So if a guy says, I'm feeling fucking shit, can you tell me more about feeling shit?
Yeah.
I wouldn't, if they hadn't said that, I wouldn't use it. But I think it's using that language. It's also the tone. And I hear myself changing gear a bit, and I'm not dissembling. I'm just allowing that person. We should be, matching that person's pace.
Yeah.
But I think humour is really important.
Yeah.
And I think the best way to get men involved in any service or any project you work on, include men in its creation. And if it's for middle-aged men, for goodness sake, get middle-aged men to do it. If it's an older men, the great tragedy is that suicide in the over 75s is really high, both for men and women.
Right.
We don't really talk about it. It's not because it's not headline grabbing. But that's something, if you're going to do a service, I hope we do, combating loneliness and feelings of end of life and feelings of old age and all of those comes. Then for goodness sake, don't get me to design it. Get somebody 30 years older to do it and involve them and listen and really do that. And that's the best campaigns I've ever seen are the ones which have been designed, which are for men, have been designed by men, had men's input. And the language is salty, perhaps. It takes balls to talk.
Yeah.
Feeling shit.
Yeah.
And even that's a hard sell for people. In the NHS, that's quite a difficult thing to clear. But I think if we're really serious about how we engage with men, we have to bite the bullet and do what's appropriate. So those are just a handful of things.
Yeah. So I can think of Testicular Cancer. Their website is called It's in the Bag.
Yeah.
So it's humour.
Yeah.
It's
you know exactly what it's about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's the key thing. And it isn't euphemism because I think there's because euphemisms more things like they passed away. I think we really need to use languages head on. But it should be slightly tongue in cheek, and that's where the magic happens. And so that's why the campaign Against Living Miserably. I'm hugely proud to have been involved with them, to continue to be involved with them, because actually their whole approach is male focused, and it's no surprise 80% of people who call the Calm helpline, open 5 till midnight, are men, and the other 20% are often women who are worried about the men in their lives.
Yeah.
And a very, very small core of young women who perhaps are self-harming, but are attracted by the vibrant, because the campaign Against Living Miserably's material is cool.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Professor Green's the patron.
Yes.
They've got huge, fantastic ambassadors. It has a sense of aesthetic, which actually appeals to young people and to anyone. So, and I certainly, wouldn't begrudge anybody should be able to get the help that they need. And if they can't call Samaritans, well, there's Papyrus if you're under 30. There's Calm if you're a man.
Yeah.
There are myriad services now, and I'm not precious about it. I'm really keen that whoever it is finds their way forward, their own way.
So is your message that don't wait until you feel you're in crisis?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that difficult?
Hugely.
Yeah.
Hugely for certain people.
Yeah.
It's really difficult because what it requires is for somebody to say, first of all, to recognise they have an issue. Yeah. And if you're self-medicating, if you're drinking, if you're taking drugs or you hedonistic lifestyle, you may be pushing all of that to the back of your mind. You then have to acknowledge that actually by seeking help, it will have ramifications. A diagnosis, medication. I talked to a young woman who said, she was describing how she felt. She's only young. She didn't want to go to a GP. I wanted to find out sort of why she didn't want to go to the GP. It was, wasn't going to tell her to go. I was curious. I just wanted to know why she didn't want to go. And she was describing her symptoms, what she's going through. It was very clear, you didn't have to be a clinician to realise that she was suffering from depression or a version of. And when we talked and I allowed her just to tell her story, and in the end she said, I really need to go to the doctor. I wonder why you haven't gone. And she said, well, I don't want to be labelled. I don't want to have a diagnosis. I don't want to be put on medication. I don't want every single relationship that I have for the rest of my life to have that conversation to say I have X or I am a Y, It's really powerful stuff. You know, some people like to have a diagnosis. Sometimes it explains things.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But not for everyone.
No.
Don't label me. Don't, you know. So everybody's different. But you know, you can see that that's just one barrier. And I think once you've realised you have an issue and you need to get help, that's quite scary. Think about the difficult conversations. And sometimes it's just easier not to. It will sort itself out. Now, that's fine if it's just a sort of tickly cough or something, but not if you've got a lump on your testicle. Not of, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And often people, you know, one of men's reticence or guys sort of say is, older people need it more. What about the women and the kids? So it's not that men are silly men not taking their health seriously. Yeah. It actually comes from quite a noble place.
Yes.
You know, as men, you know, there is, you know, rightly or wrong, there's a sort of pressure to kind of, you know, put other people first.
Protect.
Yeah, to protect, to care.
Yeah.
To not make a fuss, actually. Allow people to do that. And that's something quite noble and you know, that's quite an old-fashioned and nice notion. But not if you have a life-threatening condition, potentially.
Yeah.
And sometimes people need to do that. So I would say, if you're worried about something, talk to somebody you trust. It doesn't have to be a doctor, it doesn't have to be Samaritans, it doesn't have to be a health professional. It could just be your mate, it could just be your missus, it could just be anybody.
Yeah.
You know, but talk. I would much rather people pick up the phone and call Samaritans if they just had a bad day, they had an argument at work, they're just angry, you know, they're just fed up. And we might, you know, we'll explore suicidal thoughts and feelings potentially, you know, if they're sort of saying, you know, and it would just be, do you ever feel so badly that you think of ending your life? You might say, well, no, not. No, that's fine. You can carry on talking. You don't have to be suicidal to call Samaritans. And we'd much rather people called early. The call I dread, or the call which is just harder to deal with, is when somebody very calmly phones and says, I've been phoning you guys for weeks, months, years sometimes. You know, you've been fantastic. You give me so much support, and I'm appreciative of that. But I just want to tell somebody that I've made up my mind. And envelopes on the kitchen table, you know, my affairs are all in order, and I just want to say goodbye. And that's a very difficult, because, you know, they're not raving, they're not, you know, they're not mad. They've made a decision. A decision that makes sense for them, and they feel very calm. That's a very difficult call to unpick. Of course we try.
Yeah.
We're not going to talk anybody out of suicide, but we will listen to them and just explore what their thoughts and feelings are, you know, and hope that the fact that they've called Samaritans might indicate that there may still be some room, there's some hope, you know, but we respect people's decision once they've made it, you know. So it's really important to allow people the dignity of their own, you know, to allow them their own autonomy. Yeah. Because how dare I, you know, insert myself into someone else's life? I've no, you know, we might, you know, the longest call I think I've ever taken at Samaritans is about 2.5 hours, 3 hours. That's a, you know, it's a long call.
Yes. But
that's a fraction, a micro fraction of that person's life, their experiences, you know.
And then you're taking the control, and it's really important that the control stays with them.
Absolutely. I don't want to infantilise people. You know, their reality is their reality. Again, it takes courage to actually allow somebody to express those things, no matter how abhorrent they may be to us, you know, how troubling they are to us, is to allow them to be themselves and not to panic, not to feel the need to intervene, and just be there and allow that person to make their choices in their own, you know, their thoughts in their own words, in their own way, and allow that person to find their own way forward, whatever that way forward is. We may approve of it, we may disapprove of it. That frankly, I don't care what I think, what, you know, other people think. It's about the person right at the centre who's going through that time, whether it's a cancer diagnosis and their response to it, or whatever they're going through.
I think that a lot of people with a cancer diagnosis really feel out of control. Yeah. They can't see what's going on. They've got a cancer diagnosis, and a lot of Mark and I were talking about this earlier. They're angry. Yeah. They're really angry.
Yes.
And I went to a conference the other day, and this chap said to me, well, complementary therapies. He said, that doesn't interest me. Aromatherapy. And I said, well, great. What do you? What do you want? What would work for you? And he said, well, he actually wrote an email later, and he said, I think a drumming. He said to drum away the anger of having cancer.
Whether it's a punch bag or something physical to do that. And that's allowing somebody. That's fantastic to allow somebody to do that. And we shouldn't be afraid of anger.
No.
And this is one of the issues around male help seeking, is that guys don't want to be angry and upset somebody, but they are angry. And we should allow people to be angry.
Absolutely.
And we shouldn't be afraid of the anger, because the anger is not, it's not directed at us. It's at everything. And it's finding a way that is meaningful for people. And aromatherapy will work for some people; it won't for others.
No.
We have to allow the people to be themselves. There's so many cultural issues around all of these things, and we should be alive to that. My dad had cancer, and he had his leg amputated because of cancer, and it was really important to him he wanted to walk out of hospital after the amputation, and he wasn't far off, but he had been a runner all his life and a cyclist and mountaineer and all of these things, So what he wanted to do was very different from other people's, but that was really important to him. So actually allowing him to have those things, the things that are important to him, that motivate him, and when he was offered counselling, he was slightly, well, why would I need that? Again, the classic sort of, other people may want that, not for me. And again, that's fine.
Yeah, it's okay. But I want to walk out of hospital.
Yes.
That's what I want to do.
That's exactly what I'm doing.
And so if you can empower me to do that,
then we can talk and we can make it happen. And that's what I want. That's important to me. And when the end came, the palliative nurses came and were talking about what he wanted. He didn't care whether he died in hospital or at home. He just wanted his dignity, really. And I was able to, he wanted to shave. And my brother and I helped him to shave, and it was sort of slightly difficult, but that was important to him. He was the stubble, his 3 or 4 day growth was really kind of irritating to him. And again, I wouldn't say that everybody who is in that situation would want to shave. He did, and it's responding to that. And of course, as his sons, that was a kindness we could do for him. But I think, as anybody working alongside somebody in that situation, you listen, don't you? And you try and do what you can to help that person make sense of it for them.
Matt, and I know that this was only just over a week ago that your dad died.
Yes, he did.
So
Yes.
I just really want to say thank you so much for coming here this afternoon, because it's really a wonderful thing for you to do.
Well, thank you. Well, I wanted to do it, for Dad as well, because actually, and part of this whole business of being a Samaritan for 10 years is that it gave me a whole set of skills and an attitudes that actually I could be alongside my dad while he fought cancer. And when the end came, I was able to really be present in that moment. And I couldn't have done that 10 years ago. Before I was a Samaritan, before I'd gone, had my own psychotherapy and all this sort of stuff, I could not have done it. And it's really important that I feel I want to share that, because actually I feel really grateful, really thankful that I've had this wonderful experience as a volunteer, and I could carry on volunteering, but that I was able to live it and make it real for me, and that's a wonderful thing. And I have, the wonderful thing for me is that although Dad was, gravely ill and was ill for some time, I didn't waste that time. There was nothing that I haven't said to my dad that I needed to be said. I'm going to miss him like hell, but I'm really thankful I had that time with him, and I couldn't have done it without being a Samaritan.
Matt, thank you so much for coming this afternoon. It's been an absolute great experience for me. It's going to be a great experience for people to listen to, so thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.